Power animals, spirit animals, totems, etc. What are these things? Why do people get them confused? Why are they the same thing, but people are using different names for them? I'm going to get into that and a whole lot more. My name is John Moore, and I teach shamanism and practice shamanism. I live in the state of Maine in the U.S., and I'm going to talk to you today about power animals, spirit animals, totems, and I'll even add something that you may not have heard of before into the mix of animals and animal spirits and things, animals that are used in spirituality. First, let me talk about power animals and what a power animal is. Now, as somebody who practices the form of shamanism that I practice, from the school that I come from the teaching background that I come from, the only one of those terms that I am particularly interested in is the term power animal. That means something. It means something very, they all mean something, but that means something very specific in my practice. In my practice, a power animal is a type of helping spirit. Now, shamans work with three things. There are three main aspects to the main practice of shamanism. There are lots of other things shamans do, but this is the main thing. One is they enter an altered state of consciousness, the shamanic state of consciousness, trance, whatever you want to call it. Two is they travel in non-ordinary reality. We travel to different worlds in spirit form to do the work that we're doing. And three is they're working with helping spirits. And they're all different kinds of helping spirits. They're ancestral helping spirits and weather helping spirits and helping spirits for ceremony and helping spirits for divination, different types of healing. One of the types of helping spirits that we work with is called a power animal. And generally speaking, this is the first helping spirit that most practitioners meet if you go through shamanic training. One of the first things you will do is do what's called a power animal retrieval. So, a power animal is a helping spirit, but let's break that down even more. A power animal represents a specific animal, a specific spirit of a specific animal that lived on Earth, died, crossed over, and then has volunteered to come back and work with you, or somebody else, or a group of people, or a relationship. So you can have a power animal for your love relationship. You can have a power animal for a group of people, but individuals all have power animals as well, as do animals. So an animal can have power animals. Animals do have power animals. So again, the important part here is that it is a specific animal spirit, not a species of animal. So if you have a bear as a power animal, you have a bear, not the entire species of bears or the entire species of brown bears or black bears or polar bears or panda bears. I know panda bears aren't really bears, but that's an important distinction, is that you're not getting the whole species, you're getting an individual, because a relationship with a power animal is an individual relationship. One of the things I always caution students about is don't go find one of these animal dictionaries and look up what your power animal means, because that would be wrong. It'll be wrong no matter what. You cannot define in a dictionary what your relationship with a specific being means. That's sort of like saying, I'm dating somebody who's Scottish. What does a Scottish person mean that I'm dating? Does that mean the sky is blue and I need strength and blah, blah? No, it means I have a relationship with this person who happens to be of Scottish descent. I have a relationship with this specific animal. The power that they bring to me, the relationship that I have, the way that I work with them is going to be unique, like every relationship I have is unique. Now, I have children, and my relationship with my children is very different than my relationship with my students. It's very different than my love relationship. It's very different than other relationships that I have. And even my relationship with each one of my children is different. And it doesn't have a dictionary meaning. So the same is true for power animals. That's what a power animal is. Now, many people will use the term spirit animal to refer to a power animal, and that to me is just a mislabeling of what that is. So in general, let's talk about spirit animal. Spirit animal doesn't really have a technical meaning in the type of shamanism that I practice. It's not a thing. Not to say that people don't have spirit animals, whatever that means for them, but it is not a type of relationship that is really something that we concern ourselves in the type of shamanism that I practice and teach. Generally speaking, when somebody says such and such is my spirit animal, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing where they have chosen a species of animal that they kind of identify with. So, kitty cats are my spirit animal because I like to sleep all day and chase mice around, or, whatever it is. So very often that's how people are using that, and they haven't gone through some sort of ceremony. Now, with a power animal, there is a ceremony. It's called the power animal retrieval that connects you deeper with this power animal. There's no such thing with whatever people are calling spirit animal unless they're using that term to refer to a power animal, in which case it's kind of just a confusion of labels. And labels aren't all that important, except that when I'm communicating to people and I'm talking about power animals, I'm talking about something very specific. And if you don't understand what that means, then I'm going to be miscommunicating to you, right? Or if you say spirit animal to me and you mean power animal, but I don't know that, then you are going to be miscommunicating to me. And again, it's not that my definitions of things are the only ones or whatever. I'm just explaining this is how these things are generally used in my teaching tradition, spirit animal is not used at all, and how I've observed people using them out in the wild, so to speak. Let's get to the word totem. So very often people will say totem or totem animal to refer to a power animal or a spirit animal. Again, this is just kind of a label. We don't have another term, so we're going to slap the word totem on here. Totem has a very specific definition. It is a Native American word. I forget the specific culture that it comes from. It might be Lakota. I'm not sure. Don't, feel free to correct me. Don't get angry at me, but because I'm saying up front that I don't remember specifically which language it comes from. But a totem is it can be one of two things. So a totem can be an object that symbolizes an animal or an animal spirit. So you can have a totem carving or that sort of thing. But in general, when people are talking about a totem or totem animal, it is an animal that is linked with a specific indigenous family or tribal group. So a family or a clan might be the bear clan or the raven clan or the turtle clan or the spider clan. And different indigenous cultures will have different totems that they will use. There's a different word. Obviously, totem comes from one language, but people in Africa or Australia or whatever might use different terminology. But that's what it is. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about totem. I almost hesitate to use this word because it carries a much more casual connotation than I want to give it, but it's like a mascot. But it's more than that. But like if you think about a sports team mascot, so you have the the Chicago Bears, for example, or the Chicago Bulls, or whatever. There's like this animal that represents the team. Okay, with clans and family groups and tribes, there's a much deeper connection there, a very heavy spiritual connection to that identity. But that's what it is. That's what the totem animal is. It goes along with a particular indigenous group. And unless you unless you belong to one of these groups that has a totem, you don't have a totem. You don't have a totem animal. That is not your spirit animal. It is not your power animal. That's just the way it is. Now this, again, I don't want to speak for anybody else's culture, but there are cultures where you can be adopted in. I know people who have been adopted into particular tribal groups who are not born into them. That's not to say you should go out and try to get adopted into a culture because you think their totem is cool or something like that. That is probably not kosher and probably not going to get you very far. But it can happen that you may not be a blood relation, but are adopted in. And I know people for whom that has happened. People have been adopted into certain tribal groups, certain indigenous groups. And so then they would have the association of that totem to go along with them. And it's something that carries power for the tribe, through the tribe, that sort of thing. So there's one last concept that I want to discuss, and it's not in the title because it's not a concept that all that many people are familiar with. And I put a little emphasis on the word familiar here because this is associated with the idea of the familiar. Now, if you don't know, a familiar is usually an animal that is a companion of a witch, for example. Like we think of traditionally, witches have black cats or ravens or frogs or whatever. Harry Potter, he's got the owl, whatever. So there is this idea of the familiar, which is an animal that is spiritually linked, an animal in physical form anyway, that is spiritually linked to this magic practitioner. I don't know that much specifically about familiars, but there's this other concept that I think may be related, and maybe where we get the idea of the familiar from. But in Old Norse, there's this concept called the fylgja, FYLJGYA or something like that. Apologies, it's not spelled using English letters anyway. But in Ireland and other areas like that, it's also called the fetch. So the fylgja or the fetch. Now this is a spirit that goes before you. It's a part of you. And it can show up either in human form. If it does, it is of the opposite sex to you. Now I don't know what happens if you are transgender and you identify with a gender that is not your birth sex, the biological sex you were born with. I don't know how the fetch shows up there. If anybody does, I would love to hear from you. I would love to have that information. But it shows up as in the form of a person of the opposite sex. So my fylgja is a female. But it can also show up in an animal form, right? So you might have a fylgja that's a fox or an owl or whatever. The closest thing I can think of in popular culture is the daemon in the Golden Compass stories. If you've read the books or you've seen that, people in that world are born with this daemon, which is an animal that follows them closely through through life. And if one dies, the other dies, and there's this kind of really deep connection. The same is true for the fetch or the fylgja, although it is only in spirit form. It doesn't take on physical form. It is also not a separate animal spirit. So it's not like it was, let's say your fetch is a cat. This is not the spirit of a cat that lived before. It is a part of you. It is a part of your soul complex. And I'll do a whole video on soul complex later. It is a part of your soul. This is part of what makes you up. And this part has some independent intelligence and some independent free will, but it's really, really closely associated with you, and you can interact with it. Now, in Ireland, if you see your fetch, it portends your imminent death, which is not something, that's not a belief that I buy into, as I have worked with my fetch for a while. And as far as I can tell, I'm still alive, physically still alive. Sometimes I wake up, it's a little hard in the morning, and I feel like I might be dead, but I'm still living, breathing, and moving around. So as far as I know, I'm still physically alive, and I have worked with my fetch a lot. I honestly think there's a few reasons why this happens. I have ancestors from Ireland, not that distant ancestors. My grandfather was full-blooded Irish. His ancestors all came from Ireland during the potato famine. And so I look at it this way. There was a lot of crap that went down in Ireland over many, many years, right? So it was an island that was constantly being invaded. The Celts, the Romans, the British, all, constant turmoil, warfare, whatever. And then they went through, revolution, and they went through this huge famine. And so there was a lot of death and stuff around them. And so lots of spiritual activity was seen as a portent of impending death, when that might not have been the case. There just happened to be a lot of death around during that time. It's funny. It was a little bit of a downer. They were also very heavily converted to Catholicism, kind of late in the game compared to other places. And so a lot of the pagan beliefs had to be suppressed. So they would take over, they would place churches on holy spots. They would, convert Celtic gods and goddesses into saints. Saint Brigid is one. Brige, aka Brige, the goddess of the hearth, the Celtic goddess of the hearth, became a saint. All of this stuff. So a lot of pagan spirits, and this happened everywhere that Roman Christianity went into, a lot of pagan spirits were turned into devils and demons that were just evil. Even the word demon just means spirit in Greek, and there were good demons and bad demons and house demons and demons of the temple and all of this stuff. So it just didn't mean what it came to mean until they were trying to get rid of the competition. So we've talked about power animals. We've talked about spirit animals being kind of a loosey-goosey popular term. We've talked about totem, which is a, kind of a family group mascot or a theme of an animal that has a spiritual connection to a particular tribal or family group. And then we talked about the fetch or the fylgja, which is another type of animal-like spiritual component. It is not a separate spirit. That's kind of the difference with the fetch and the fylgja. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I hope that clarifies some things. I hope to see people using the term power animal more correctly. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I will talk to you real soon.